The rain hammered against the windows of our small London flat, mirroring the tempest brewing inside me. Alaric, a 43-year-old IT specialist, had always considered myself a logical man, a man of reason. But logic had no place in what I was feeling. It all started subtly, almost imperceptibly. Bronte, my wife of 15 years, a vibrant and passionate artist, had begun to change. The late nights at the studio became more frequent, the excuses vaguer, the affection colder. At first, I dismissed it as stress. Bronte had been working tirelessly on her upcoming exhibition, a make-or-break moment for her career. I poured myself into supporting her, cooking her favorite meals, running errands, offering a listening ear when she was overwhelmed. I was the rock, the steady foundation she could always rely on, or so I thought. The first real crack in the facade appeared a few weeks before the exhibition. Bronte had left her phone on the kitchen counter, something she never did. Curiosity, that insidious little devil, gnawed at me. I told myself I was just checking the time, but my fingers hovered over the screen, drawn to the notifications that popped up. Messages from an unknown number, each one a little too intimate, a little too suggestive. Thinking of you, one read. Can't wait to see you tomorrow night. My heart clenched. Tomorrow night. Bronte was supposed to be at home with me. I told myself it was a misunderstanding, a wrong number. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and it began to grow, feeding on my insecurities and fears. I tried to talk to Bronte to voice my concerns, but she brushed them aside, accusing me of being paranoid and controlling. You always do this, Alaric, she said, her voice laced with irritation. You always try to stifle my creativity, my independence. I recoiled, stung by her words. I had always championed her art, encouraged her to pursue her dreams. Was I really the villain she painted me to be? I pushed my doubts aside, determined to support her through the exhibition. The opening night arrived, a whirlwind of art critics, gallery owners, and wealthy collectors. Bronte shone, radiant and confident, the center of attention. I watched her from the sidelines, a proud but also strangely detached observer. She seemed so distant, so inaccessible. Later that evening, after the crowds had thinned, I saw her talking to a man I didn't recognize. Was tall, handsome, with a disarming smile. They were standing close, their heads bent together, their voices low and intimate. A wave of nausea washed over me. I approached them, my voice strained. Bronte, darling, everything all right? She turned to me, her eyes widening slightly. Alaric, this is Caspian. Caspian, this is my husband, Alaric. Caspian extended his hand, his grip firm and confident. Pleasure to meet you, Alaric. Bronte has told me so much about you. Words felt like a punch to the gut. What had she told him? What version of me had she presented to this stranger? I forced a smile, my mind racing. Likewise, Caspian is a friend, Bronte interjected quickly. He's a fellow artist, of course. They exchanged a knowing look, a silent communication that excluded me, that confirmed my worst fears. The next few weeks were a blur of anxiety and suspicion. I became obsessed with Bronte's whereabouts, constantly checking her phone, following her when she left the house. I hated myself for it, but I couldn't stop. The doubt had consumed me, turning me into a shadow of my former self. One evening, Bronte told me she had to go to the studio to work on a last-minute commission. I watched her drive away, a knot of dread tightening in my stomach. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that she was lying. I waited an hour, then got in my car and followed the route to her studio. But instead of turning onto the industrial estate where her studio was located, she drove further, heading towards the outskirts of the city. My heart pounded in my chest. Where was she going? She pulled into a secluded car park, hidden behind a row of trees. I parked my car a short distance away, my hands trembling. I watched as she got out of her car and walked towards a small, discreet hotel. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, my mind reeling. I wanted to believe there was a logical explanation, a reasonable excuse. But deep down, I knew the truth. After what seemed like hours, I saw Caspian arrive. He parked his car next to Bronte's and disappeared inside the hotel, the world tilted on its axis. My breath hitched in my throat. The pain was so intense, so visceral, that I thought I might actually die. I sat there, paralyzed, unable to move, unable to think. The rain continued to fall, washing away the last vestiges of my hope, my trust, my love. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, I started the car and drove home. I didn't confront Bronte. I couldn't. I was too broken, too devastated. The next morning, I waited for her to wake up. She came downstairs, her face flushed, her eyes bright. She looked happy. "Morning, Alaric," she said, her voice cheerful. "Did you sleep well?" I stared at her, my heart aching. How could she be so normal, so carefree after what she had done? "I know," I said, my voice barely a whisper. Her smile faltered. "Know what?" "I know about Caspian. I know about the hotel." Face paled. "Alaric, I don't," I said, cutting her off. "Don't lie to me, not anymore." She burst into tears, collapsing into a chair. "It just happened," she sobbed. "It didn't mean anything. It didn't mean anything," I repeated, my voice rising. "You betrayed me, Bronte. You broke our vows, our promises, our love. And you tell me it didn't mean anything." She looked up at me, her eyes pleading. "I'm sorry, Alaric, I truly am. Can you ever forgive me?" Forgiveness was a luxury I couldn't afford. The trust was shattered, the love irrevocably damaged. There was no going back. "I want you to leave," I said, my voice cold and detached. "I want you out of my life." She stared at me, her eyes wide with disbelief. "You're serious?" "Yes," I said. "I'm serious. I want a divorce." She didn't argue. She simply nodded, her tears flowing freely. She packed her bags, her movements mechanical and lifeless. As she walked out the door, she turned to me one last time. "I'll regret this, Alaric," she said, her voice barely audible. "I'll regret losing you." I didn't respond. I simply closed the door and locked it behind her. The following months were a blur of legal proceedings and emotional turmoil. The divorce was messy and acrimonious. Bronte fought me every step of the way, demanding a large settlement, claiming I had stifled her career, that I was responsible for her infidelity, but I refused to back down. I had been wronged, betrayed, and I was determined to get what I deserved. In the end, I won. I got the flat, the savings, and the peace of mind knowing that I had stood up for myself, that I had refused to be a victim. But the victory felt hollow. The pain of Bronte's betrayal lingered, a constant reminder of the love I had lost, the trust that had been broken. I threw myself into my work, burying my emotions in spreadsheets and code. I avoided social gatherings, afraid of facing the pitying glances and awkward questions. One day, a mutual friend, Aliana, contacted me. She was Bronte's closest confidant, and I had always liked her. She asked if we could meet for coffee. I hesitated, unsure if I was ready to face someone who was so close to Bronte. But Aliana was persistent, and eventually I agreed. We met at a small cafe near my office. Aliana looked uncomfortable, her eyes filled with a mixture of sympathy and guilt. "Alaric, I need to tell you something," she said, her voice low. "Something that Bronte never wanted you to know." My heart pounded in my chest. What else could there be? Bronte and Caspian, they had been seeing each other for months before the exhibition, Aliana said, her voice trembling. It wasn't just a one-time thing, it was a full-blown affair. I stared at her, numb with shock. Months, the lies, the deception, the betrayal, it was even worse than I had imagined. "There's something else," Aliana continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "Bronte, she's pregnant." My world shattered. Pregnant. "With Caspian's child." "She told me she was going to tell you," Aliana said, "but she was afraid. She didn't want to lose you, lose me. She had already lost me the moment she climbed into bed with another man." I stood up, my legs shaky. "Thank you, Aliana," I said, my voice flat. "Thank you for telling me the truth." I walked out of the cafe, my mind reeling. Bronte was pregnant with Caspian's child. The realization hit me like a physical blow. It was the ultimate betrayal, the final nail in the coffin of our marriage. I spent the next few days in a daze, unable to eat, unable to sleep. I replayed the events of the past few months in my mind, searching for clues, for signs that I had missed. But there were none. Bronte had been so careful, so calculating, so deceitful. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't let her get away with this. I couldn't let her raise Caspian's child in my shadow. I contacted a lawyer, a ruthless and experienced divorce attorney who specialized in high-profile cases. I told her everything about Bronte's affair, about the pregnancy, about the lies and deception. She listened patiently, her eyes cold and calculating. "We can use this to our advantage, Alaric," she said, her voice sharp. "We can expose her affair, challenge the paternity of the child, and ensure that you get what you deserve." I hesitated. I had never been a vindictive person. But Bronte had pushed me too far. She had betrayed me in the most profound way possible, and I was determined to make her pay. We launched a full-scale legal assault. We subpoenaed Bronte's phone records, her bank statements, her emails. We hired a private investigator to track her movements to gather evidence of her affair. The case became a media sensation. The tabloids had a field day, splashing our story across their front pages. Bronte was vilified, branded as a cheating wife and a heartless liar. She tried to fight back, claiming I was a jealous and controlling husband, that I had driven her into Caspian's arms. But the evidence was overwhelming. The truth was on my side. In the end, she crumbled. She agreed to a settlement that was far less than she had initially demanded. She signed away her rights to the child, acknowledging that Caspian was the father. I watched her walk out of the courtroom, her head bowed, her face pale. She looked defeated, broken, utterly alone. I felt a pang of guilt, a fleeting moment of regret, but it quickly passed. She had made her choices and she had to live with the consequences. I walked out of the courtroom a free man. The weight of the past few months lifted from my shoulders. I had won. I had gotten my revenge. But as I walked away, I realized that the victory was bittersweet. I had destroyed Bronte's life, but I had also destroyed a part of myself. The pain of her betrayal would always be with me, a constant reminder of the love I had lost, the trust that had been broken years past. I never remarried. I focused on my career, building a successful business, traveling the world. I tried to forget about Bronte, to erase her from my memory. One day I received a letter. It was postmarked from a small town in France. The return address was unfamiliar. Curiosity piqued. I opened the letter. It was from Bronte. She wrote about her life in France, about her struggles as a single mother, about her regrets and her mistakes. She admitted that she had been wrong, that she had hurt me deeply, that she would always regret losing me. She asked for my forgiveness, not for her sake, but for mine. She said that she knew she didn't deserve it, but she hoped that one day I would be able to find peace. I read the letter several times, my emotions swirling. Part of me wanted to dismiss it, to reject her apology. But another part of me, a deeper, more compassionate part, felt a flicker of sympathy. I thought about all the years we had spent together, the good times, the shared dreams, the love that had once bound us together. It was all gone now, lost to betrayal and deceit. But holding on to anger and resentment was only hurting me. It was time to let go, to forgive, not for her sake, but for my own. I picked up a pen and wrote a short reply. I told her that I forgave her, that I hoped she found happiness in her new life. I wished her and her child well. I sealed the letter and dropped it in the post box. As I walked away, I felt a sense of closure, a sense of peace that I hadn't felt in years. Bronte's betrayal had been a defining moment in my life, a painful and traumatic experience that had changed me in profound ways. But it had also taught me valuable lessons about love, loss, forgiveness, and the importance of moving on. I had survived. I had emerged from the darkness stronger, wiser, and more resilient. And in the end, that was all that mattered. The final twist came years later. I was contacted by a solicitor. Caspian had died, leaving everything to his daughter. Bronte was contesting the will, claiming that she deserved a share of his estate. I was subpoenaed to testify. In court, Bronte was a shadow of her former self, haggard and desperate. She claimed that Caspian had promised her a life of luxury, that he had abandoned her and their child. The judge ruled against her. Caspian's will was upheld and Bronte received nothing. As she left the courtroom, she caught my eye. Her gaze was filled with bitterness and regret. I simply shook my head. Karma, it seemed, had finally caught up with her. I walked away, leaving her to face the consequences of her choices. I had finally found peace, a sense of closure that had eluded me for so long. Bronte's betrayal had been a chapter in my life, a painful and difficult chapter, but it was finally closed. I was free to move on, to embrace the future, to find happiness again. And that, in the end, was the greatest revenge of all. Years later, I heard through a mutual acquaintance that Bronte was working as a waitress in a small cafe, barely scraping by. Her artistic ambitions had faded, replaced by the harsh realities of single motherhood and financial hardship. I felt a pang of sympathy, but it was fleeting. She had made her bed, and now she had to lie in it. My life, on the other hand, had flourished. My business thrived, I traveled extensively, and I found love again with a kind and compassionate woman named Meredith. We built a life together filled with laughter, adventure, and mutual respect. Looking back, I realized that Bronte's betrayal, while devastating at the time, had ultimately been a catalyst for positive change in my life. It had forced me to confront my own vulnerabilities, to reassess my priorities, and to build a stronger, more authentic version of myself. I had learned the importance of self-respect, the value of trust, and the resilience of the human spirit. And for that I was grateful. The rain outside has stopped. A sliver of sunlight pierces through the clouds, illuminating the room. I take a deep breath, feeling a sense of calm wash over me. The storm has passed. The healing has begun. And I am finally free.